What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Canadian Football Fanatics YouTube channel. And thank you guys for tuning in to another video. Well, ladies and gentlemen, CFL fans, we have done it. The long off season is officially over, and we have some actual CFL football to talk about. The Calgary Stampeders defeated the BC Lions 26 to 16 on beautiful Vancouver Island, BC, in Langford, BC, I should say, at Starlight Stadium. The Lions taking over Langford on the island for their one and only preseason game. And it was other than the result of the game, I thought it was a pretty good turnout overall. The atmosphere was perfect. I think having a little experience playing in Starlight Stadium, it is a perfect little venue for something like this for a CFL preseason game where, you know, I'm going to be curious to see what the official attendance was, but, 6,000 fans can fit in there. It's a nice tight atmosphere, and it doesn't feel like there's a lot of empty seats. It appeared that it was a solid of a game, so really enjoyed myself down in Langford. Even more so that I didn't have to jump on a ferry to get home. Did unfortunately have to go through the drive back up the Malahat to get back home to Nanaimo. Just did a few hours ago. Just got out of the shower. Just actually finished rewatching a little bit of the game, about a quarter and a half of the game, and then just got out of the shower. And then gonna jump on here to do a little post game report for you guys. Nothing crazy, as it is only preseason, and we are taking bits and pieces from this game as it is preseason, but all in all, it is the first preseason game of the season with, you know, I will like to remind folks that CFL camps only opened on May 11th, the game being played here today on May 19th, 8 days after camp opening, you know, still working out the kinks, so you could say. All teams are, not just the Calgary Stampeders and the BC Lions. So we'll talk about bits and pieces that I like, some that were, I think, a little bit, we'll I think follow up is probably a better way to frame it, and overall just talk about a few things that stood out to me at the game. So I'm curious. One last thing as I look down on my notes when talking about the venue, folks, please let me know if you guys attended the game down in Langford. If you're a fellow Islander, if you made the trip over from Vancouver, if you made the trip over from, maybe if you're a diehard Lions fan, Calgary Stampeders fan, from all over BC, even Calgary, maybe you made the trip to the island. I know many CFL fans were there. What you guys thought of the atmosphere? What you guys thought of the venue? Did you like, the Lions putting on their backyard party? I thought there was a good job for getting fans out a couple hours before kickoff, filling up the stadium, getting the buzz around. You could it was kind of cool, actually. Shout out to Carly, my lovely girlfriend, for booking a very cool Airbnb that was actually in the backyard of the Airbnb was basically Starlight Stadium, so it was kind of cool to see the stadium get set up, hear the music playing and stuff like that. And like I mentioned, just a really good venue, I thought, for a preseason CFL game. I would hesitate to say that I think it's a good fit for a regular season game when trying to, you know, generate as much revenue for your team as possible. When I don't know how many people you could realistically jam into a stadium like that without having any issues, or without having similar issues to what you did at Touchdown Pacific at Royal Athletic Park with, long concession lines and longer bathroom lines, and things just getting a little bit out of hand with the rise in capacity. I think it would be something that I would be interested in, and wonder what the conversations are like going on behind the scenes. And why I bring that up is because the World Cup being hosted at BC Place next season, it has been slightly talked about. It is still early, and it will be taking place next year. I believe the World Cup is in June sometime, if I'm not mistaken. Forgive me, folks, if I'm a little off by that, but I know it's around the same time as CFL season, if not during CFL season, where I think the Lions could be out of their home for a little bit of time, or a few weeks period, a few games, I guess, period of time is what I'm trying to say. Forgive me, folks. It has been a long day, as I, got up pretty early, went down to, or I guess went down the street to Starlight Stadium, checked in, got my credentials around 9:30, and as I'm recording this, it's about 9:30 p.m. So It's been a long day, and we are back to work tomorrow, unfortunately. But as I was saying, the World Cup being played in BC Place next year, I'm curious that if the Lions would potentially think about coming back to a place like Langford and doing it at a Starlight Stadium once again. I think the facilities are much, much better and are equipped for something like a professional organization compared to Royal Athletic Park, where I think is lacking a little bit, where they had to adapt pretty hard. I'm curious of what they're going to do when it comes to next season. Maybe they look at playing at the Peony grounds or something like that, with being able to put up some expansion seating pretty quickly. I'm curious. I think that's a conversation for another day, or maybe even next year. Let's get on to what we saw take place down in Langford. So, like I mentioned, the BC Lions falling 26-16 to the Calgary Stampeders. Calgary Stampeders bringing over a lot of second and third and fourth stringers, guys they want to get a good chunk, or give a good opportunity to go out there and put some good film out there for, if not the Calgary Stampeders, other teams around the CFL. And like kind of what generally happens in the CFL, will tend to dress their more veteran, more closer to their game day roster at home, where they're able to control a little bit more things, able to put on a show, hopefully for the fans. And that is maybe where we can start with, obviously, the built-up anticipation of one Nathan Rourke, with now the keys to the franchise officially get handed over to Nathan Rourke. It is his team. Vernon Adams was in attendance, did not play in the game, made the trip over from Calgary, the short trip, I may add. Um, we saw him do this with the Lions over the past few seasons, of going on the road preseason games, and being involved in the play calls and hearing it through his headset, and being very locked in and engaged. And he was once again for the Calgary Stampeders, being it that is his new team. Just a quick shout out to VA for just the guy that he is, the person he is, and the player that he is, for everything he represents, and was definitely receiving a lot of love there at the stadium there this afternoon. So the built-up anticipation of Nathan Rourke, and it being his team, and it being teased that he would be playing one series in the game. And he did play that one series indeed. He played a grand total, drumroll please, of 4 plays, if those that weren't able to watch the game. And I don't know if he's going to be officially credited for a passing play, although it wasn't much of a pass. But I believe it would be credited as a shovel pass forward. So I believe Nathan should finish as 1 for 1 on the day, although it was a jet sweep shovel pass, although it could be ruled, it could be, I guess, kept, is maybe the best way to put it, as a rush. I wasn't able to actually check the box score after the game, but like I mentioned, 4 plays, and ultimately we didn't see too much from Nathan Rourke. Um, I don't think the Lions meant to show much of Nathan Rourke, to be quite frank, which is not a shocker by any means. Not that I don't think it's too out of what we're going to see a lot, but for the 4 plays, I believe we had 2 tight ends, the extra offensive lineman, Riley Pickett, as our fullback slash tight end, kind of versatile weapon, Swiss Army knife on offense now, in for all 4 plays. 3 running plays to Jordan Tyrell, who I might add was pretty impressive, and we'll talk about him in a second. But Nathan Rourke, quick work, he comes out of the game for one Jeremiah Soley, who ends up going on a scoring drive and punching it in for a touchdown, throwing a touchdown that was a pretty lucky one, I might add, that was supposed to be more of a corner pattern. Masoli, kind of with some pressure in his face, ended up kind of throwing it a little bit more flatter, kind of more like a out. And the defensive back jumped it, had his hands on the ball, and would have definitely took it in for a touchdown, but went right through his hands. And the wide receiver, it's not Jaden Darden, his name's escaping me now, and I forgot to write it down. Excuse me, folks, but hauled it in, for the touchdown, and the Lions took the early lead on the first drive of the game. Now, where I'm going to rewind a little bit and just talk about Jordan Tyrell, who I think is a guy who impressed, being able to be down on the field there pregame and stuff like that. He was a guy that was physically imposing. Another guy was his running back mate, Xander Horvath. Another guy, Xander, being, I think he's like 6'3", 6'4", 230 or 40 pounds, a very big back. Jordan Tyrell stood out as a guy that was being down there around him as a very thick guy, very strong lower half of his body with, strong tree trunk of type legs. And he showed that on his first few runs of the game, running hard. There was the first, I believe it was maybe, I don't know if it was the first second down or it was the second down of the game there, where he, broke 2 tackles for the first down, kept running, showed strong. I think is a guy to keep an eye on for BC Lions fans to be some very good depth for JB. He was a guy that was on the BC Lions last year and I believe played in a few games as well for the 2024 edition of the Lions. I think he's a guy that could be a very valuable depth option and push a guy like James Butler to make sure that he's playing at his best, that nothing's, given to him for, especially with things like, Nathan Rourke's contract, Matthew Bett's contract, having some highly paid guys, you might have to, look for some cheaper options. Not that I'm saying that's going to happen or likely, but something to definitely keep an eye on when it comes to the running back position. A guy like Jordan Tyrell maybe is the cheaper option when it comes to a guy like James Butler, who I will say, folks, to pump the brakes. I'm pumping the brakes myself. Just something to keep an eye on. James Butler and a BC Lions uniform again is something I'm looking forward to very much. And I think is a very big storyline this season. Like I mentioned, Xander Horvath was another guy I thought stood out. Was a NFL draft pick, I believe, was taken in the 7th round by the San Diego. Could have been the LA Chargers, and is a guy also to keep an eye on for some depth in the backfield. Wore David Mackey's old number 34, kind of looked like him. It was a little bit weird seeing him in warm. Like I had to double take and be like, wow, is that David Mackey in pads? And a little bit of a taller, or looks a little more, maybe I should say like a little bit leaner, not as cut up as David Mackey. And I think maybe he has an inch or two on him. But wearing the number 34, his playing style, the way he came out of the backfield, catching passes as well, kind of a similar, I don't want to say playing style, or kind of, I don't know what the right, I would say, I guess, playing style, a similar style to his game than to David Mackey. Now, where I will kind of tie in the offensive line now is that I thought they were doing a very good job of opening up some run lanes there early on in that first quarter, first drive specifically. And unfortunately, the game got came to reality really quickly, and the injury rate being 100%. And unfortunately, the thing for preseason games, no matter how much you try to, play with precaution, and even I wouldn't say play with precaution, because you play with precaution and you're going to get hurt playing half stepping and stuff like that. That's how you're going to get hurt. I would say just you can play with as much, um, because you want to play as free as possible when you're out on the field, but you can, um, be as clean as possible. And just the most freakish stuff where guys fall in the pile. Same kind of similar thing happened with Anai Una, or George Una. I don't know what we're officially going with, because the guys were calling him George Una on the radio, but I believe is what we've been told is he wants to be called Anai Una. So I'm going to go with that. Um, Una. He was rolled up on the play, unfortunately, by a defensive lineman, and was definitely what I think what looked to be more like a high ankle. It was, questioned on social media of it being a knee injury, and I don't believe it was a knee injury. Actually, I can confirm I believe it wasn't a knee injury. Uh, Head coach Buck Pierce was actually asked after the game, did he have any updates? He told the media no. JC Abbott from Three Down Nation was walking around post game and saw Una with a walking boot on, which I'm kind of leaning towards possibly a high ankle sprain. He was in quite a bit of pain, so hoping that no breaks, although I'm sure we won't know the severity until tomorrow once they're able to get some x-rays on it, once they're able to get back to Kamloops, I'm sure. Maybe they just take him back into Vancouver. It will be TBD for sure. But as of now, I guess it's not to be as serious as initially anticipated. It kind of looked like, I know people were thinking torn ACL on social media, as I mentioned. I saw him not being able to put any weight on his right leg or ankle, whatever you want to call it. But when he was hopping on the field, not being able to put any weight on the right side of his body, not a great sign for a guy who was the projected starter at right guard, and that is just unfortunately the nature of the beast. Now, while I will say this is the exact reason why you have the insurance that is David Voku, veteran offensive lineman who likely slots in at right guard now to at least I would say start the season unless the injury to Una is way less significant than thought initially. But this is the exact reason why you have make a signing like David Foucault in the offseason, a veteran who's played meaningful snaps for the Edmonton Elks. His ceiling as of now is definitely not as high as Una, and we don't even really know Una's official ceiling, but I would say his floor, right? We know where he can, slot in as a starter. He's a serviceable guy. He's not going to blow your socks off by any means, but he's going to come in, likely do his job on majority of snaps, and you just hope that Una's not gone for the season. He's able to come back, and they're able to push each other and may the best man win kind of throughout the season and into hopefully a long playoff run. The Arsenal offensive line, like I mentioned, um, open up some run lanes there early on. I think we saw glimpses early of what we wanted to see or what Buck Pierce's offense may look like. And we saw early on a lot of, downhill running with Jordan Tyrell and a lot of extra offensive linemen, uh, big personnel in with the tight end and the double tight ends with that extra offensive line set. And I think we really saw a glimpse of what Buck Pierce is going to want to try to bring to BC with running downhill with Jordan Tyrell, as I mentioned, and then getting the defense going side to side and eventually opening up that play action. Unfortunately, they weren't able to open up that play action today, but they were, excuse me, a few times able to get that side to side going. First series of the game, they went to Jermaine Jackson, who I will talk about in a second, on that jet sweep pass from Nathan Rourke, who I mentioned, went to Jackson. He was able to pick up the first down. They tried to get another kind of inside zone slice that we're accustomed to seeing in Nick Dembski or Dalton Schoen kind of running out the backside of the fake run that the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are run. We kind of seen something like that drawn up that Masoli was able to they were hoping Masoli was going to be able to execute. Unfortunately, there was a little bit of a missed handoff with the snap, and it kind of was able to or it was fumbled away. Excuse me. The receiver that was in the flats that I think it was intended to go to was wide open and would have picked up the first down on the play for sure. But like I mentioned, that downhill running that they like to set up with Buck Pierce, that Buck Pierce likes to set up, you get him going side to side, and then eventually you get that downhill running going, and you can open up your shots downfield with that play action. I think we saw a little bit of what Buck Pierce could potentially be bringing to BC this year, while also staying pretty vanilla, not wanting to go crazy in his play calling. And I would imagine there's going to be some wrinkles that'll be pretty cool with the starters, and we'll see come week one and throughout the season as well, with it being preseason game one, and it also, like I said, only being 8 days into camp, and the whole playbook is probably in, but how much of that has been repped, you know, 12 on 12 and stuff like that. So I would imagine there's quite a bit of stuff that's still been held back. But from an offensive standpoint, 16 points. Jermaine Jackson, maybe we can close it out there as likely the team's front runner as the leading candidate for the kick return, punt return position. I thought he played pretty well. He showed some juice there in his return abilities. He also had a touchdown on the little slant pattern that Chase Bryce found him there late in the game. That potentially looked like could have been a spark to lead them back to tie and or win the game. Unfortunately, the Lions kind of fell flat after that point on. But Jermaine Jackson I believe he had 50-ish yards for one touchdown, had quite a bit of yak yards as well. A guy that showed some burst, and then the return ability showed some burst in his return. In his few returns, I think he only had three maybe combined, but I would believe it was 10 or 15 yard average on his returns was very reasonable for preseason, his first action as well for in the CFL game. So will be something to keep an eye on if Jackson goes to Edmonton in 2 weeks, and or who else is going to be in contention for that spot. Hopefully, you're able to maybe have some personnel on from the Lions, and or maybe one Farhan Lalji, Nick Kowalski. We'll see anybody that's up at Kamloops to um, touch base with how things are going up there, who's being in that battle with Jermaine Jackson. I really liked what I saw from Jermaine Jackson there today. Was able to go back, like I mentioned, and rewatch the game, rewatch a quarter and a bit of the game with being there on the field, and that's probably one thing that I would recommend for fans that are looking to get maybe the best view is Starlight with the state or the excuse me the sideline sides. Say that 10 times fast. The sideline sides. You're kind of at the mercy of the players and how big the football players are, and you're kind of trying to look through them and stuff like that. It's a little bit tougher. I would recommend definitely sitting up a little bit higher. It's probably perfect if you're 7, 8 rows up, which Starlight Stadium I think probably has about 15 or so rows that go up vertically, and those back 7 rows I would say are probably the money spot where you're looking over the players and have a pretty good view of the full field, no matter where you are on the sideline there, especially or even excuse me on the Lions side of the field for those that were in attendance. But as I mentioned, Jermaine Jackson, a front runner for the returner spot and a nice weapon, gadget weapon on offense, I think that could be used for Lions fans to keep an eye on as well. And something, like I mentioned, else to keep an eye on is who is returning kicks in the Lions' last preseason game versus the Edmonton Elks. So let's get over to the defensive side and then let's get out of here, guys. Not to stick around too long for a preseason recap, but it is nice to be back in the saddle talking some BC Lions football. We'll be, as you know, we'll be more often than not joined by my main man, Blake Milton. Blake unable to join me tonight, and I know Blake wasn't able to catch the full game, but once the regular season rolls around, Blake will be back in the saddle with me, joining me after every game and previewing all the games. Of course, let's get to the defense. I think let's start with the defensive line and work our way back since as we just left off with the offensive line. Defensive line, I think I would have liked to see a little bit more juice from. It's tough to say as well because I think there was a lot of guys that, not a lot of guys, but there's a few guys that probably other than a guy that we'll talk about. How many of these guys are going to be in rotation quite a bit? Marcus Moore, the guy that I thought had some juice, is a guy that's going to be probably in contention to be in rotation quite a bit. Marcus Moore in on a sack on the play where he was in the backfield before I think the quarterback even knew. I don't know if it was PJ Walker or Tommy uh, Bonner that was in the game at that point. But Marcus Moore beat his guard, his interior offensive lineman, and like I mentioned, was in the backfield before the quarterback even know what has happened. He showed some juice for sure, but other than that, not much juice from the offensive line, considering that, a lot of second and third stringers, as I mentioned, brought from the Calgary Stampeders, a very young group that was suited up for the Stampeders here today. Guys like Christopher Fortan, first round pick from this past year's CFL draft, and a few other youngsters, a couple Canadians as well in there for the Stampeders. A guy like Giuliano Felinaco, who's going to be more than likely playing significant amount of snaps for Sione Tuamua, who's going to be on the suspension list, didn't really show too much, wasn't heard from too much. Like I mentioned, I will go back and try to maybe watch the second half of the game to see if he showed any more flashes other than the first half. But pretty quiet game, and this is where a preseason game is something that you want to, you know, take into consideration, but also let's pump the brakes a bit, folks. It is preseason action. We are going to see these guys playing with, let's say Giuliano Felinaco is the guy that comes in the starter number one opposite of Matthew Betts in game number one is what I'm trying to say here. He's likely going to be getting one-on-ones for the entire game, right? So as I mentioned a few weeks ago, the funny nature that is the offensive line versus the defensive line. You can be an offensive lineman and you let up one sack a game, you're probably looked at as not a great offensive lineman, although you could be. Where a defensive lineman, maybe you get blocked all game, you get one sack a game, and you're looked at as a great defensive lineman because over 18 games, you're 18 sack guy. All you have to do is get home one time, and I think if Juliano Felinaco can get home one time for the 6 games that Sione Tuiama was out because he's getting one-on-one options due to Matthew Betts on the other side, Christian Covington, other guys that are along the defensive line. I think that is something that, like I mentioned, you have to pump the brakes on Juliano Felinaco not showing too much in today's game. Defensive line, other than that, a guy that I was looking for to maybe show it a couple of times, Nathan Cherry. I saw some flashes. He was definitely showing some juice on special teams getting down there and is a guy to keep an eye on. But the interior of the defensive line, man, there's a lot of names in there, and I think a lot of capable caliber, starting caliber reps already in there with Thibaut Dubaye, a few other guys already that are going to be, likely that there's not a lot of game jerseys probably inside there with Marcus Moore, Christian Covington, Thibaut Dubaye, a few other guys. You know, can a guy like Nathan Cherry, Canadian kid, University of Saskatchewan product, can he get a jersey on game day? I think that he's a guy to keep an eye on as well. Coming off, you know, excuse me, some significant injuries, tearing his knee, and was a high draft. Excuse me, folks, was a high draft pick for the BC Lions. So there is always that kind of caveat going for him that he's going to be given more opportunities than the guy that's undrafted or maybe a seventh and sixth round guy. So something to monitor for sure is who's going to be able to step up opposite Matthew Betts and kind of Christian Covington, a few guys in the interior, while Sione Tiama, and I think that's something that they need is they need some juice along that defensive line so that the guys in the secondary aren't covering 3, 4 Mississippis, and I think good things will happen on defense. At the linebacking core, talked about Mike Richardson, Devin. I forget the Mike and Devin that were playing, um, that were talked highly about. Excuse me, by let me find it here. Mike Smith and Devin Richardson. Excuse me, folks, that were talked highly about from Ryan Rigby. Hard to see in the middle of the defense, those guys kind of make flashes from where I was sitting. Like I mentioned, I did go back, not watching them too much on the rewatch, so I will try to maybe go rewatch them a little bit better. Didn't, didn't really feel their presence too much. Like I mentioned, it is preseason, so kind of pump the brakes, but just guys to keep an eye on because those backup linebackers are going to be important, special teams guys. But with guys like Adam Konar, Eau Claire as well. Eau Claire, I know, is a guy who's dealing with some injuries right now, but those guys with CFL veterans and the experience of playing special teams, they probably have the leg up already. Still, those two guys are probably linebackers to keep an eye on. Tyler Coyle stood out to me right away another guy, as I mentioned, with Horvath and Jordan Tyrell, physically imposing when I went on the field there and was like, man, who's the guy in number 6? That was Tyler Coyle that was lined up in the jersey number 6. Watching him in warmups, he was a very big guy. Don't know if he's quite 6'4". I want to say he was 6'3". Last time I looked at the roster, very big linebacker. I think he's going to be able to use that range in that nickel role. Had the interception as well for the BC Lions, which made the nice play. Probably a little bit late of a throw. The quarterback tried to fit it in there late after getting some pressure, scrambled up in the pocket, trying to kind of evade the rush there. And Tyler Coyle probably came out of nowhere to the quarterback, was able to jump in front of the pass and set up the Lions into the Stampeders field position, field territory, excuse me. And the Lions were able to cash in with a touchdown there after that. Tyler Coyle is a guy that I would probably bank on is your game one starter at the Sam linebacker or nickel position, as the Lions call it. And is a guy who I'm really interested to see. Intrigued is probably the better word, honestly, more than interested. Intrigued to see him in the lineup with some other starters and going against the other team's best players as well. It's going to be an interesting player to keep an eye on, Tyler Coyle at the nickel position. So last guy, of course, is one Jackson Finley. Jackson is a guy that, had him on the podcast, BC boy, Big fan of his, wanting to go to the Lions. He ends up coming to the Lions in the second round. Steal of a pick at 16th overall. Was a guy who I was very interested to see get the start at safety. Played 3 quarters, had a very long run sample size, got some pretty reasonable film, got a lot of film out there, excuse me, and had some good, I'm sure had some bad on film when you go and rewatch it. I'm sure there's going to be a couple plays where you wanted back, but made his presence known, especially on the first 2 plays of the game. The first play of the game specifically there was, him kind of not in his traditional spot at the, one high safety kind of spot, I guess, for if I'm making sense to people, but it was a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage. It was kind of an outside zone run and shot up to his what I would think his assignment, set the edge really well, made the running back kind of turn back up inside to where all his buddies were, and kind of the gang tackle ensued, and he was able to, I would think, do his job on the play there. And had a few other tackles in on the play, but nothing too crazy. Just kind of did his job. Was in on a couple of special teams tackles as well, as I think that will be his likely home for his rookie season. Is a 4-phase special teamer. Christophe Bouilloux is your day one starter, a guy that is probably untrenched. I don't know if you go away from him right away, especially with just drafting him last year. No matter what Jackson does for the remaining 10 days at camp, I would think they're going to go with Christophe Bouilloux until proven otherwise, until there's some significant blows in coverage and stuff like that would have to happen, I would think, before they go to Jackson Finley. And something that I was kind of questioning around, poking an eye on, or excuse me, poking around with a few of the guys that I mingle with there down on the field, asking if Jackson's maybe been taking some reps at Sam at all, or at nickel. And I think he's can play there as well. But that's why I think he's going to get a jersey on game days, because he can fill in at all those positions and be a weapon on special teams. Lastly, I guess, is special teams before we get out of here, folks. Carl Myers. Carl Myers is going to be the team's new starting punter. Moving on from Stephen Flintoff this offseason, Carl Myers had himself a pretty good afternoon, and it was highlighted by a 70-yard bomb that was from the BC Lions 10-yard line and flipped the field all the way to the Calgary Stampeders 30-yard line. He bombed the ball. Jackson Finley was actually in on the tackle on that one. But Carl Myers, the Aussie football rules kicker, coming over and trying Canadian football is what I should say, not American football, Canadian football, trying it for the first time last season. Believe he played in one game, and it was in Victoria once again, so maybe it's the comfort of the Victoria air, the breeze from the water. Was able to bomb one of the kicks, was pretty, didn't have any shanks, so I think they mentioned on the broadcast it's more about the consistency with Carl Myers and making sure that he stays as consistent as possible, because he's going to have one or two of those bombs, hopefully a game, if not one every other game type of thing. So put a bow on special teams. Jermaine Jackson as returner, Carl Myers in the punting categories. And just to, folks that are maybe stressing a little bit right now of, 26-16, we lost with, our said, you know, upper hand with having more of our veterans dressed at home. You know, we kept obviously Calgary kept a lot of guys at home, but we know with guys like Matthew Betts, Justin McInnes, Gary Peters, Javon Katoy, Micah Alway, the Ben Haladix, Christian Covingtons, the um, you name it, Christophe Boyus, the James Butlers, and both of our tacklers. Dejon Allen still isn't practice, but Dejon Allen left at home, and Joel Broxton still at Kamloops. There is a lot of pieces still to be played, and this team I think is going to look a lot different on June 7th. So just kind of this is a nice sample size to get a look at the first kind of glimpse of what the 2025 BC Lions could be. But this is going to be a glimpse and a peek, I would say, of a lot of these guys could be playing elsewhere or could be on the practice roster and not have as big of roles come the regular season. Some of these guys are going to have big roles, as I mentioned, Jackson Finley's and Tyler Coyles and some of the other guys on offense. Especially in the offensive line with Andrew Pearson. I think is going to be a regular contributor, whether he's a starter or not. slugger Corey Woodruff. I think those guys that are in the battle for the left guard position. Hopefully, Annie Una's okay. Nathan Work for the 4 snaps that we saw him. So, it's going to be okay, folks. And we're likely to see a pretty different team on June 7th. What I was kind of hoping to see today was the what the philosophies are on offense and defense and special teams, what the kind of foundation is going to look like. And we saw, like I mentioned, that little bit of foundation on offense with Buck Pierce and the downhill running, setting up that side to side, and then trying to attack you downfield with the play action and stuff like that. On defense, I was interested to see, were they going to be disciplined? They gave up a couple, pass interferences on, some balls that were chucked up, and it's an unfortunate thing where, yes, you should be in good position and maybe you should try to make a better play on the ball, because I think if they could have maybe intercepted it. It's unfortunate when you have some of those underthrown balls, or maybe just balls that have a lot of air in them, and you're in good position, but you don't look back for the ball and you kind of run into the receiver who's making a good play by going back to get the ball and drawing that pass interference. You're kind of doing a disservice to yourself by putting yourself back into good coverage and just trying to get your head turned to see where the ball is coming in and trying to make a better play on the ball instead of crashing into the receiver and setting up some pass interferences that I know extended some drives. I know there was a couple special teams penalties as well. There was a 25-yarder, I believe, that resulted in a first down for Calgary Stampeders. So some things that you'd like to see cleaned up for sure, and some things I'm sure that'll get corrected by like Buck Pierce, but I don't think we're going to get a true sample size by for Buck Pierce, the head coach, until, like I said, June 7th, for Mike Benavides and kind of what he's going to be for the BC Lions as defensive coordinator for the second time now. And it's going to be interesting. I'm really excited for June 7th. The next time you're going to see the BC Lions is when they take on the Edmonton Elks. I think that's going to be a very young roster that heads to Edmonton as well. I'm curious to see how many veterans actually travel with the roster as well. But something to keep an eye on as well is just what that game day roster looks like. And now with preseason, we see it in the NFL quite a bit of guys will take maybe a series that we saw Nathan Rourke or less, and then just call it until the regular season and just not run on risk injuries, as we saw here with Una today. The 100% injury rate that comes with playing football, of you never know what down it's going to come on, but it's going to come at some point. It's just the nature of the business, unfortunately. How many veterans go? Do you even want to risk sending many? And maybe you send a lot of guys to try to evaluate that you want to get a good look at and give them some good quality game reps. I think that's more likely the option there. But only having a certain amount of guys, I'm sure there's going to be some guys, the Andrew Pearsons of the world, the Jackson Finleys, and Tyler Crowells might have to dress up and suit up for the team as well. So will be something to keep an eye on as well, folks. So 38 minutes, perfect time for me to sign off for the video. You guys will be able to find us once again on the weekly show, the CFL weekly show, that's going to be on the 13th Man YouTube channel from now on. We had a blast getting back in the saddle last week. The four of us, Coach Phil, Blake, and Shane and I, talking CFL football on a weekly basis all season long. We'll be back on Wednesday night tomorrow by the time this is uploaded. But we'll be back on Wednesday night talking all things CFL. I'm sure we'll be talking about this game as well. But the next time you'll see Blake and I is likely the last week of May before they head to the Edmonton Elks game. And then you guys will see us during the regular season week opener. We will be back the first week of June with our kickoff episode and our season prediction, of course. But other than that, folks, the BC Lions fall to the Calgary Stampeders in the first game of the 2025 CFL season, 26-16. And that's going to do it for our post-game report, and we will catch you guys on the next video.